context is important, and that is what this video tries to provide, along with highlighting some good articles to read. We'll talk about concerns with not buying more stuff, concerns with buying more stuff, and concerns with borrowing money to buy more stuff. So without much further ado, let's get on with it. This write-up is interesting, because it tries to make a case for buying stuff, over buying experiences, in a legible and meaningful way. Its premise is that stuff is cheap, and experiences are costly. Then why should we sacrifice the former, and run after the latter, when some of them can be downright ugly, like healthcare and education? In addition to that, if buying and using things keep you away from poor ordeals, then you should absolutely do it. Like getting and using exercise equipment at home, which can keep you away from healthcare services. That kind of makes sense. Also, the author writes about how expensive real estate is constraining our lives, because our homes are tiny. Could it be that minimalism, which tells us to choose experience over buying things, is motivated by this lack of space? And if you can move into a bigger and better home, away from the city, then this false dichotomy of having to choose one over the other will disappear. Which also kind of makes sense. I mean, of course. The bottom line here is money. More money will surely go a long way towards alleviating many constraints in your life. So the message could also be that, please work harder, build better networks, earn more money, buy a bigger home, move away from the constraints of a city, and then you can enjoy both things and experiences. You may want to read it because the author presents a slightly adjacent view to what is a commonly held belief. Also, minimalism is overrated. It is only natural that we follow up the previous story, with one about buying less stuff. In some ways the author wants us to think more deeply before we buy more things. He even uses a reference from George Carlin, that our homes are just placeholders for stuff, and any empty space, or time in our life, propels us to fill it up by buying more things. George Carlin's monologue is so funny because it is kind of true. In addition to that moral allegory, the author wants to also think about the burden, not just on our lives, but also on the environment, as we go on surrounding ourselves with more things. But you know what? Maybe it's alright. After all, as we find out, the author has gained better appreciation of music as a result of his struggles with a not very useful purchase of the Sonic spreadsheet. Overall, a good read, and entirely worth your time. Read this to know how big pots of money become bigger by taking advantage of the opportunities presented by the pandemic. An entire landscape of people and businesses are impacted by the unfortunate goings-on of the last couple of years, as a result of which they need money to do their thing. And sometimes, that money comes in the form of expensive debt. It is surprising how wide this landscape is, right from people trying to buy expensive phones, to airlines doing a sale and leaseback of aircrafts, to sports federations decimated by extended lockdowns, and even biomedical startups who hire celebrities like Khloe Kardashian for their branding and promotion. The key context here is that these loans are expensive. And that they are risky, so much so that in most cases the banks have decided that they want no part of it. The article talks about it only obliquely, by saying that all these lenders are making good money. In each case, the borrower would rather not have to borrow that money. The Australian Rugby Federation would not have borrowed that money, if the pandemic-driven lockdowns had not cut it down to the bone. Biohaven, a startup, would not have borrowed that money for branding and promotion, if its revenue and profits were sufficient. And that person buying the iPhone on a BNPL scheme may have preferred to pay up front, if he could. The other bit is that these lenders are replacing banks. Banks are the preferred source of debt, because they are the cheapest, and can provide the least onerous terms. but unfortunately, banks usually pull back if they feel uncomfortable with the level of risk. Maybe there is a greater uncertainty about continuity of business, or the borrower does not have enough collateral. Those who step in that space created by the banks moving out usually charge more. Mainly because they are taking a greater risk, but also because they can under the circumstances. A third bit of context here is that these lenders are borrowing money to pad their returns. Maybe it is the banks who are lending to these lenders. So the money goes from the bank, to these lenders, to the end user like the airline, or the startup. It is only reasonable to think that the longer this chain gets, the more costly the loan is to the final person downstream. And that is because each entity making up that chain is a business and is looking to make profits, which is how our world works. Thank you for making it to the end. The articles are linked in the description below. Also, consider subscribing as it helps out this tiny channel a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.